More people have been talking about the trailer for the sci-fi horror film Morgan than the movie itself. It's partly because the commercial and critical response to the film has been less than lukewarm, and partly because the clip was the first to be created entirely by artificial intelligence. At the request of the filmmakers at 20th Century Fox, IBM used its supercomputer Watson to build a trailer from the final version of Morgan, which tells the story of an artificially created human. First, Watson was fed background information on the horror genre in the form of 100 film trailers. It used visual and oral analysis in order to identify the images, sounds, and emotions that are usually found in frightening and suspenseful trailers. Watson then analyzed Morgan and identified the key moments of plot action from which a trailer of the film could be generated. Only the final act of putting the sounds and images together to create the trailer required human intervention. So how did Watson do? The trailer features the familiar visual and narrative devices that have been the staple of horror film. The reclusive mad scientist, the business-like investigator, the eerie soundtrack including the main theme and a lullaby that evokes themes of childhood and innocence, contrasted with images of physical violence and bloodshed others. In fact, the iconography featured in Watson's trailer reaffirms what many film theorists say are the generic conventions of horror films, based on iconic examples such as the 1931 version of Frankenstein. But is the purpose of a film trailer just to repeat the generic conventions that characterize a film? While some trailers clearly do this, or simply trumpet the presence of star actors, others highlight the film's spectacular possibilities. Early film trailers often describe the wonders of the emerging technology of cinema such as synchronized sound, Vitaphone, and Technicolor, and many still underline the historical moment of the film. Others focus on explaining the story and conveying the movie's look, feel and themes for the prospective audience. Next page, full article. It's now illegal to keep dangerous animals as pets in the United Arab Emirates, UAE, where exotic creatures can often go hand in hand with flashy cars and designer clothes among the Persian Gulf playboys. According to Gulf News, the freshly passed laws mean owners of dangerous animals must own a license, which will only be handed out to zoos, research and conservation centers, and circuses. The list of banned animals isn't yet clear, but it's believed to include cheetahs, leopards, and other big cats. Owners who take their dangerous animals out in public will face fines ranging from 10,000 to 500,000 UAE dirham, $2,720 to $136,000, and potentially jail time. Possession of dangerous animals for trading purposes will be punished with even harsher sentences and fines. The government is also encouraging the public to report any offenses to authorities. People keep wild animals as a status symbol. Also, they are under the misconception that by having wild animals in their homes they are conserving them, said El Sayed Mohammed, regional director at the International Fund for Animal Welfare in Dubai, according to the Abu Dhabi-based newspaper The National. We welcome and congratulate the UAE government in taking this important initiative, which we wish to be a milestone for the rest of the countries, not just in the region, but also in the world. Posting images and videos of big cats on Instagram has become somewhat of a status symbol for members of the UAE super rich. However, official figures on dangerous animal ownership in the UAE aren't available since the market remains largely unregulated. The numbers seem to be mind-blowing, Patricia Tricorake, who's worked with the Cheetah Conservation Fund, told National Geographic in January 2016. I was told that in the last 2 weeks there were 2 sets of 30 cheetah cubs in Yemen ready to be shipped to the Gulf states. For most parts of the brain, our teen years are either as good as it gets, or at least as large as it will be. Brain development goes on into our 20s, but it involves the addition of extra connections, not adding bulk. However, a new study has found that one section of the human cortex keeps on growing long after related areas have stopped. The area in question is the part of the fusiform gyrus responsible for recognizing other people's faces. The capacity to recognize faces develops early. When you are as helpless as an infant, it is pretty important to be able to differentiate between family and strangers. Nevertheless, it doesn't stop there, with the capacity improving as we grow up. The capacity to do this is located in the fusiform gyrus, which also controls recognition of places and words. It has other capabilities as well, such as color processing. Even our closest relatives are so different in this area that studies have to be done on humans. Using both quantitative and functional magnetic resonance imaging, a team led by Stanford University PhD student Jesse Gomez compared the brains of children aged 5 to 12 and adults to see how the fusiform gyrus changes as we age. The quantitative scans helped them to see structural changes in the brain, while functional imaging allowed them to see which brain regions are active when given tasks such as identifying faces from partial images. After examining the areas of the brain that light up when matching an image to a distorted version of the same face, Gomez found that our face recognition centers keep growing into adulthood, while the equivalent areas for location recognition do not. This growth was not in vain, however. The researchers found a correlation between the size of the relevant brain region and the ability to match a face under difficult conditions. Given how closely entwined these two regions are within the fusiform gyrus, this is a surprising finding. It also might be thought that adults, who have presumably been a lot more places than children, might benefit from a greater capacity to store those memories. Nevertheless, Gomez confirmed the findings through autopsies. Children's brains, fortunately, are seldom available for dissection, making it difficult to establish which brain components are responsible for the expansion. Nevertheless, Gomez notes in Science that, while a thickening of the myelin sheaths that protect neurons is known to occur during teenage years, this cannot account for the growth on its own. Instead, the paper suggests that cell bodies and dendrites are growing as well. How do you lose a town that once housed 10,000 people? Quite easily, it would seem. For hundreds of years, a bustling medieval town lay hidden in the British countryside until an amateur archaeologist bought it on a hunch that ultimately proved correct. Now, 15 years after starting his excavations of the site on the English-Welsh border, Stuart Wilson has finally been vindicated by finding the lost city of Trelitch. Archaeologists have been searching for the medieval town for a while, but had mistakenly been looking for it around the modern-day village of Trelitch, in Wales. But back in 2002, Wilson, who was working in a toll booth at the time, was informed of a farmer on the English-Welsh border who had been finding bits of pottery in molehills and thought that the subterranean mammals might be onto something. After visiting the farm in question, he found the remains of a wall. After taking a bit of a punt and buying the land, when it next came up for sale for £32,000, his initially derided investment has now paid off. People thought I was mad, and really I should have bought a house rather than a field, Wilson, who was in his early 20s at the time, told The Guardian. But it turned out to be the best decision of my life. I don't regret it at all. It has been a labor of love for Wilson to excavate the site over the last 15 years. But, with the help of over 1,000 volunteers, they have uncovered at least 8 buildings, including the possible foundations of a moated manor house that is thought to have had 2 halls and a courtyard. As soon as the weather improves, Wilson plans to spend much of this season investigating this structure further. During its heyday, the medieval town would not have been an insignificant settlement, with a population around a quarter of that of London during the same period. It is thought to have been founded by the de Clare family in the 13th century to manufacture weapons, armor, and other military equipment, and rapidly grew as it attracted local farmers and laborers to the urban center. But the industrialized town crumbled after repeated attacks from the enemies of the de Clare family, and its position on the border made it the target for Welsh resistance against the English. Coupled with diseases that swept Trelitch, and the town soon fell into ruin. Wilson is now applying for permission to build a visitors center on the grounds, as well as a campsite, to help encourage tourists to visit the dig and learn about its history. You've got stacks of canned food, a chainsaw at the ready, and the doors all nailed shut. But in case your zombie apocalypse survival plan is in need of a review, physics students from the University of Leicester in the UK have looked into the rate of survival in the case of a hypothetical zombie viral outbreak. Their study even managed to get published in the Journal of Physics Special Topics, a peer-reviewed student journal. Working on the premise that a zombie can find one person each day, their findings said there's a 90% chance of a zombie infecting a victim with the zombie virus. After 100 days of zombie infection, they worked out there would be just 273 remaining human survivors. That would mean zombies outnumber humans 1,000,000 to 1. They came to these conclusions using the SIR model, a scientific model that helps to gauge the spread of a disease throughout a population. They even managed to factor in that survivors may be less likely to become infected over time as they gain experience or skills to fend off and fight zombies. It isn't all bad news, however. In a follow-up study, they included human reproduction rates and the chances of humans killing zombies. They found that the world's human population would eventually be able to replenish itself. Dr. Mervyn Roy, their tutor from University of Leicester's Department of Physics and Astronomy, said in a statement, "Every year we ask students to write short papers for the Journal of Physics special topics. It lets the students show off their creative side and apply some of physics they know to the weird, the wonderful, or the everyday." When a girl's breasts start growing early, it can be a sign she will develop certain diseases later in life. There is evidence of early puberty leading to increased risk of obesity, type 2 diabetes, heart disease and cancer, particularly breast cancer. Girls who develop breasts before the age of 10 have around a 20% higher risk of breast cancer in later life than girls who develop breasts between the ages of 11 and 12. If you could prevent breasts from growing early, you might be able to reduce the girl's risks of developing these diseases. Until now, unfortunately, scientists have poorly understood the processes that make some girls develop younger than others. But new findings from our research at the University of Glasgow solve a large part of the mystery and could have important health implications as a result. It is usual for girls to develop breasts around the age of 10, though plenty start earlier or later, and this is often seen as normal and harmless. Yet the higher risks of earlier developers ending up with breast cancer or the other diseases are a significant concern, not to mention other psychological and physical problems that can crop up. In addition to potential feelings of isolation and embarrassment, early puberty is linked to earlier sexual activity, which can lead to emotional damage as well as unwanted pregnancies and sexually transmitted diseases. Studies show correlations with depression and eating disorders, and early developers tend to be tall for their age, but actually shorter as adults. Why me? Anna Jerkovska. The bad news is that throughout the world, puberty is beginning earlier and earlier. In the US, it is believed to be happening a full year earlier than a few decades ago. However, the reasons are largely unknown. A number of studies have shown an association with childhood obesity. But while this is a popular theory, as obesity is known to affect hormone levels, it does not explain why onset varies substantially between different ethnic and socioeconomic groups, earlier among Black girls and those from poorer backgrounds. Another theory is that we are increasingly exposed to chemicals in the environment which mimic hormones that may be accelerating puberty. Next page, full article. Romantic love in Western societies is often portrayed in a stereotypical way. Two yearning halves who search for each other to find their complete, original state. Few find this bliss because it's a myth dating back to Plato. In Greek mythology, the perfect lovers were joined together and sliced in two. Love, then, is the desire of each part to find the missing other. This myth lingers on in popular culture, love stories and romantic comedies. It affects our social identity, which for many is formed by stereotypical, scripted portrayals of relationships. Often, less consciously, we keep on searching for our missing half, the ideal, but divorce rates attest to why this ideal doesn't exist. Plato has a lot to answer for. Pan Media Shutterstock.com. Nowadays, many people escape into the virtual world in their search for the ideal relationship. Online dating, flirtatious messaging and sexting are often used as an antidote to loneliness, lack of intimacy and the painful experience of loss. In cyberspace, we can be whoever and whatever we desire to be. This gives us pleasure, but it seduces and lures us into the imaginary. The world of the unconscious, where desires we didn't even know we had are immediately satisfied in the virtual world. It's easy to become addicted to this virtual world because real-life love can't compete with it. For some, a return to reality is difficult or even impossible, as rising internet addictions and online infidelity show. This can result in various emotional, stress, hopelessness, anger, pain, and behavioral reactions, fights, revenge porn, divorce, substance abuse, binge eating or not eating. The link between stress, a broken heart, love sickness, mental health, depression, obsessive-compulsive disorder, insomnia, and physical health, exhaustion, is well documented. Next page, full article. Planetary scientists have used a weather forecast model and computer simulations to discover that Earth and Pluto both sport ice blade formations, something we haven't seen anywhere else in the universe. These amazing findings are published in Nature. The structures are known as penitentes, as fields of them look like people doing penance, and they are formed by the erosion of bowl-shaped depressions with blade-like spires. On Earth, they can be up to 5 meters, 16 feet, tall, while on Pluto they can get 100 times as tall. This gargantuan size is predicted by the same theory that explains the formation of these features on Earth, lead author John Morse of York University, Toronto, said in a statement. Exotic differences in the environment give rise to features with very different scales. These giant penitentes are not quick phenomena like their cousins on Earth, but take tens of millions of years to reach their current height. The formations have been observed in the region informally named Tartarus Dorsa, which is located to the right of the heart of Pluto. The Plutonian environment is significantly different from our planet. It is colder, the sun is dimmer, and the air is much thinner. Also, the snow and ice on Pluto are not made of water, like on Earth, but of nitrogen and methane. It might appear weird that Earth models work on our planet as well as the distant world, but since the same physical laws apply across the cosmos, it's not surprising that similar structures form on different celestial bodies. In fact, we were able to match the size and separation, the direction of the ridges, as well as their age. 3 pieces of evidence that support our identification of these ridges as penitents, said Morse. This test of our terrestrial models for penitente suggests that we may find these features elsewhere in the solar system and in other solar systems where the conditions are right. It will definitely be interesting to look for the existence of similar formations on icy moons like Europa or Enceladus. After a disappointing 2016, when most of the annual major meteor showers were washed out by moonlight, 2017 looks far more promising. Of the big 3, the Quadrantids in January and Geminids in December are both visible in dark, moonless skies. Sadly, the Perseids in August will again be badly obscured by a waning gibbous moon, but they are always worth watching. Here we detail the predicted meteoric highlights for the coming year for the northern N and southern S hemispheres, and those visible for both NS. New this year, for each shower we also give the maximum zenithal hourly rate, ZHR, the maximum number of meteors per hour that could be seen, given absolutely ideal conditions. The rates you actually observe will be lower than this value. The higher a shower's radiant in the sky, and the darker the conditions, the closer the observed rates will get to the ZHR. For this reason, if you want to see the best of a meteor shower, try to find a good, dark site, far from street lights, and give your eyes at least half an hour to adjust to the darkness. For each shower, the time of forecast maximum is given in Universal Time, Utah, with conversions to local time for certain regions where the shower could be observed. For other regions, simply convert from Utah into your local time zone. The parent is the comet or asteroid responsible for the debris through which the Earth passes each year. That's the cause of the annual meteor shower. Quadrantids, N, active. December 28, 2016, January 12, 2017 forecast maximum. January 3, 2 p.m. Utah equals January 3, 6 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, West Coast, U.S. equals January 3, 11 p.m. JST, Japan, ZHR, 120 parent. Comet 96P Matsholtz Asteroid 2003 EH1. The Quadrantids get the new year off to a meteoric start. At their peak they can be spectacular, with rates often exceeding 100 meteors per hour. For locations north of 40 degrees north, the shower's radiant, the point on the sky from which the meteors appear, is circumpolar, which means it is always above the horizon. The result? Quadrantid meteors can be seen throughout the hours of darkness. The best viewing is after midnight, local time, as the radiant climbs high into the morning sky. The quadrantids come from the northern part of the northern hemisphere's sky, with their radiant rising higher in the sky during the early hours of morning. Museum's Victoria Stellarium author provided for most of the shower's fortnight of activity, only 1 or 2 meteors per hour might be seen. For that reason, the quadrantids are often overlooked, but at their best, they are well worth the effort of setting an early morning alarm on a cold winter's night. The forecast maximum this year favors locations in the western part of North America and in Far East Asia. Observers north of the Arctic Circle have the privilege of being able to watch the shower continuously, if they can brave the winter cold. Next page, full article. The internet may be the most comprehensive source of information ever created, but it's also the biggest distraction. Set out to find an answer on the web, and it's all too easy to find yourself flitting between multiple tabs, wondering how you ended up on a page so seemingly irrelevant to the topic you started on. Past research has shown that we have a very limited capacity to perform 2 or more tasks at the same time, and brain power suffers when we try. But my new study suggests that some people are better at multitasking online than others. Being able to switch between multiple web pages and successfully find what you want all comes down to how good your working memory is. Working memory is the part of the brain responsible for the storage and processing of information, decision-making, and planning. It is responsible for the attention, quality, and quantity of information that is stored and processed in both the short and long-term memory. Many psychologists describe working memory as the ability to retain a specific amount of information while intervening with other information or tasks. Previous studies have suggested that working memory plays an important role in multitasking. For example, one study showed interruptions reduced people's ability to multitask. This suggests our working memory can only hold a limited amount of information at any one time, limiting our capacity to think about multiple things at once. My new research focuses on, among other things, how people's different levels of working memory influence their multitasking behavior while using the web. I assessed the working memory of 30 students using an automated operations span test that asked them to remember a series of written characters while solving maths questions. I then asked them to use the web to research 4 topics of their choice, 2 they had prior knowledge of and 2 they didn't. This was particularly important as research has shown that having prior knowledge of a subject means you can study it with less effort from your working memory. Information overload. Shutterstock I found that participants with high working memories switched between their information topics and web search results more often than those with low working memory. This seemed to enable them to test and retest different strategies for finding the answers they wanted. This means that they were able to divert more of their attention between different tasks. The people with high working memory also reported that they were able to coordinate existing and new knowledge, multiple topics, and deal with interruptions more easily. And they had a better grasp of trying different strategies, such as using different search engines, formulating search queries, evaluating web pages, and saving results. What's more, those with low working memory capacity thought the previously unfamiliar topics they were researching became more complex as they went on. They also reported that they could not generate more strategies to complete the task or evaluate and judge the content of the web pages they were looking at in the same way as they did for the topics they had prior knowledge. Next page, full article. Stronger than steel and impressively elastic, spider silk is already a natural marvel. Yet researchers have improved upon the natural material even further by adding antibiotics to the silk that could aid in wound healing and recovery. After 5 years of research, scientists at the University of Nottingham have managed to develop a novel technique that uses click chemistry to tailor spider silk to specific applications. By attaching certain molecules to either the silk proteins or the resultant fibers, they can add drugs or chemicals to the material. The key to the new material involves incorporating an amino acid within a side group, which is widely used in click reactions in chemistry. By creating E. coli bacteria that can produce this newly modified spider silk, the researchers then found that they could incorporate certain molecules into the silk by targeting this newly added amino acid. They then attached molecules, such as the antibiotic levofloxacin, and clicked them into place. When they did so, the team found that its antibacterial activity slowly released over a period of 5 days from the silk. How rapidly the drug is released could in theory be controlled, which means that it could potentially lead to the production of wound dressings that both dispel the antibiotic over time and form a natural, degradable scaffold for the healing body. There is the possibility of using the silk in advanced dressings for the treatment of slow-healing wounds such as diabetic ulcers, explains Professor Neil Thomas, co-author of the study published in the journal Advanced Materials, in a statement. Using our technique, infection could be prevented over weeks or months by the controlled release of antibiotics. At the same time, tissue regeneration is accelerated by silk fibers functioning as a temporary scaffold before being biodegraded. The added molecules can be applied so that they adhere to the silk proteins before or after they form the silk fiber. The team can even add a whole range of molecules that give the silk multiple different properties. The researchers now plan to delve further into the research and examine exactly how they can use the new spider silk material. They hope their research will encourage other labs to do the same. Want to use science to predict the future of human society? Welcome to Cleodynamics. This is a somewhat nebulous field of research that attempts to merge together cultural evolution, economics, large-scale sociology, and even the mathematical modeling of various historical epochs. The idea is that everything is quantifiable, and patterns can be discerned from the chaos of human activity over time. Peter Turchin, a cleodynamicist at the University of Connecticut, has spent much of his career attempting to build predictive models of the real world. Writing a piece of correspondence to the journal Nature back in 2010, he claimed that a period of incredible instability is coming to both the US and Europe by no later than 2020. Quantitative historical analysis reveals that complex human societies are affected by recurrent and predictable waves of political instability, Turchin noted. In the United States, we have stagnating or declining real wages, a growing gap between rich and poor, overproduction of young graduates with advanced degrees, and exploding public debt. He points to data revealing that periods of instability, driven by such interconnected factors, happens in 50-year cycles within the U.S. Giving examples, he cites the 1870s, featuring a financial crisis that caused a depression in North America and Europe. The 1920s, the end of the decade, triggered the Great Depression, and the 1970s, featuring Watergate and the destabilizing effect of the Vietnam War on American society. Winter is coming? Roman Mikhailiuk Shutterstock with the sudden rise in right-wing populism across both, peaking with Brexit and the election of Trump. Turchin has recently claimed that his theories have been validated. My model indicated that social instability and political violence would peak in the 2020, Turchin writes, pointing to his 50-year cycle theory. The presidential election which we have experienced, unfortunately, confirms this forecast. Not just content with this possible coincidence, he also points to factors leading to this point: wealth inequality, growing governmental dysfunction, and the fragmentation of political parties into moderates and more hardline populist factions, to name just a few. Next page, full article. The world's most seemingly toxic lakes are under threat, and they are also home to one of our most familiar birds, the flamingo. All flamingo species have evolved to live in some of the planet's most extreme wetlands, like caustic soda lakes, hypersaline lagoons, or high-altitude salt flats. One species, the lesser flamingo, has taken this relationship to the limit. Most are found in super-alkaline lakes throughout Africa's Great Rift Valley, which host immense blooms of microscopic blue-green algae, called cyanobacteria. These poisonous plants produce chemicals that, in most animals, can fatally damage cells, the nervous system, and the liver. The lesser flamingo, however, can consume enormous amounts with no ill effects, unless you count their colorful plumage, which comes from a pigment in the algae. Birds in paradise, two of the lesser flamingo's preferred habitats, Lake Bogoria in Kenya and Lake Natron in Tanzania, are hypersaline and hostile to practically all other forms of life. Natron water can even strip away human skin. For the flamingos, this is a bonus. Special tough skin and scales on their legs prevent burns, and they can drink water at near boiling point to collect fresh water from springs and geysers at lake edges. If no fresh water is available, flamingos can use glands in their head that remove salt, draining it out from their nasal cavity. With few other animals able to cope in such conditions, there is minimal competition for food, and these toxic wetlands are home to massive flocks. Feeding time on Lake Iringa. Gudkovandri Shutterstock million-strong gatherings provide several benefits. Mass synchronized nesting gives flamingos the best possible chance to raise the maximum number of chicks, while on choppy days a dense mass of birds swimming together also helps create the optimal feeding environment, still water, within the center of the group. Sheer numbers also make it harder for predators like hyenas or jackals to identify individual victims. As such, a single flamingo is not a happy flamingo. The species is happiest in huge gatherings, and these won't occur around any old lake. The lesser flamingo specifically needs its toxic salty paradise. But these places are rare. Across the 6 flamingo species there are only 30 or so regularly used breeding sites worldwide, and while the global population of around 3.2 meters lesser flamingos is impressive, it is largely reliant on a few huge groups, about 75%, nested Lake Natron alone. What if something happens to one of their highly specialized breeding sites? Unlike many other species that can still breed in smaller populations as their habitats become damaged, these birds cannot easily survive in small groups. Having evolved in such a hostile environment with few rivals, they would have trouble adapting to a more competitive lifestyle elsewhere. With most of their eggs in one toxic basket, the lesser flamingo is unusually vulnerable for a species with millions of individuals. Lesser flamingo's Latin name Phoeniconius minor means little crimson water nymph, an apt description of their dancing, ballet-style moves. Stephen Forster Shutterstock. Indeed, the number of lesser flamingos in the wild is already decreasing each year. And humans are to blame. Wetland habitats have been polluted by agricultural chemicals and sewage, feeding and breeding grounds have been disturbed, and declining algal blooms mean some populations are starving to death. Even a diet of toxic algae can't save flamingos from ecological disturbances. If humans take too much water from a lake, or climate change causes excess evaporation, then salinity levels will become unstable. Populations of cyanobacteria can explode, and the birds end up consuming new species which can poison them and cause mass deaths. Next page, full article.